We are in the process of making the Pi server easier to browse for tags by implementing AF, this asset database that allows you to go out and find things using a hierarchy. And as you can see in this builder screen, we can go through and we can drill down and find the options that we want. Well, in addition to doing this within these builder screens, we do have a general purpose tool that we call the PI TreeView that allows you to do that independent of each of these web parts here. But then what you find, what results you come up with, whatever context you find browsing through that AF database, can be applied to one or more of the objects on your display. In other words, we've got a general browser that's available, and we call it the PI TreeView. Let's go ahead and add one here. I'll go ahead and get into edit mode. We're going to choose to add this web part. Oops, wrong place. I'll put it over here. So the tree view will be on the left and the trend on the right. I'll look for a PI TreeView. Now, like our other web parts, we need to configure this before we can get much use out of it. So I'll go into this option, Modify Shared, and configure the two required elements. The two required elements are that we provide the root node of the browsing we're going to be doing with this particular web part, and the default node. That default node is actually an option. So I can do this using browse here instead of just typing those in there. I'll go out and browse for this is going to be the root under which all of my nodes are going to appear. Now I'd like to look at these, I think there were flow meters in our equipment list. Yeah, we have 6 of them. I'd like to be able to see all 6 and choose between the 6. So I'm going to choose flow meters as my root. I can do a right mouse click and choose root node. I can also drag and drop that. And then I need to choose the default. I'll just choose the first one as the default. I'm going to ignore all the rest of these items here. Just go into get out of build mode and show you the end result. It shows us that root plus those items organized underneath the root. But as you can see, there's really no effect here. Now we're going to get into the element relative web parts in the next video, but before we do that, I'd like to go over the extended properties, and also we'll look at attribute parents. Extended properties first, though. This is an interesting little feature in which each one of the elements in AF has an extended properties option that you can set, and by setting these extended properties or adding extended properties, you can actually make configuration changes to how this appears here, and also you can add hyperlinks. So there are 2 extended properties that we currently support. One is the word icon, the other one is the word URL. Icon, as you might guess, changes the icon of the element, and URL implements a hyperlink to whatever URL you want to specify. So we start this by going into an element that we're interested in modifying. I'll just choose this tank here from this structure. This is an arbitrary structure I just chose because it was easy to work with. Of course, it doesn't matter what structure you work with here. Now what I'd like to do is add 2 elements underneath here. One we're going to pretend is a link to where you might find some operating instructions, and the other is going to be a link to, let's go to a web page. So I'll choose new child element, and under this new child element, I don't need to choose any template for this. I'm just going to call this, let's just call this operating instructions. Now this is where we would probably implement either a hyperlink or some mechanism to route you to the proper operating instructions at this point, either by specifying in the attributes where that's located, or we could do this hyperlink that I'm going to be showing you in just a few minutes. But in either case, no matter how I implement the actual link to the operating instructions, in either case, I would like to change this icon. We've got this little cube here, and I'd like to change that. Well, how would I change that? Well, just like with every one of these other elements, this new element I just created has an extended properties. And with extended properties, you can add this property called icon. That's one of the 2 that we currently support. And then you can put a link to where you would find the new icon. In my case, I actually put on my local, the local drive on this particular AF server, this file called cbook.gif. It's a little book that looks like an operating instructions, and it's in that directory right there. So let me copy that. I'm going to put that right here, and if I remember, it was called cbook.gif. And it's just simply a string field. Now once I check this in, you'll notice that it doesn't affect what you see over here, because this is something that has an effect. The extended properties have an effect not on the Pi System Explorer, but on the Pi TreeView. Let me go ahead and refresh my screen. As you can see, we just have, because I refreshed, I see that there is now something organized underneath here. And when I click on that, notice it's now showing up with that GIF file as the icon instead of just the normal tank or the normal cube that we're seeing for everything else. So that's one option there. Now, and that's one extended property. Now, a second extended property would enable a hyperlink. So let me pretend now. Let me add a brand new element. Whoops, I forgot where I was for a second. I don't do that here. I do that over here. Remember, here's the System Explorer. What we were looking at on the web page was, of course, just the TreeView control, or the TreeView web part. So I'll choose a new child element, and this child element is, I'm just going to call this, how about Hurricane Center, something like that. And the reason we're putting that there is because I would like to implement, through the extended properties, a URL extended property. And that URL extended property will point me to where I would find, oh, I don't know, let's say hurricane information on a web page. So in order to do that, I need to, again, go into extended properties. Now, remember, I could do this on any of these elements. I'm just doing these on two separate elements here. I can go into extended properties. I'll do a new extended property. The reserved word is URL. And now we specify what the actual the URL is. In this case, it's HTTP. There is a website called Storm Pulse that you can use to look at severe weather. So let's go with the Pasadena, Texas zip code. I know they get a lot of severe weather there. And now with that extended attribute, or extended property URL, I can exploit that by going into my, by going into this TreeView here. Let me refresh my screen. We should see that TreeView has now recognized this new link. And of course the big finish is now, because I've specified URL as the extended property, when I click on here, it's going to go out and browse to that web page. As you can see, it's going to take a second here on the network, but that's going out and finding that web page. And there we go. And I'm not going to wait for the rest of this to come up, but that's, as you can see, it's gone out and browsed as I requested it to. If I go back, we're back here in the TreeView example. So that's an example of using these extended properties. So I suppose a real big finish would be for me to link this to some place where we actually have stored the operating instructions on a web page. So that would be pretty straightforward. I would simply go in here and add a second extended property. I would specify URL, and then this would be the location where that document is found. So I would put in that as a web page or whatever kind of a reference.